On 5 News tonight, junior doctors announce 5-day strikes every month until Christmas. The victims of the police chase tragedy are named. And the Alton Towers Smiler ride gets stuck again. Junior doctors confirmed 3 more 5-day strikes as the Prime Minister hits out.
The government is putting patients first. The BMA should be putting patients first, not playing politics.
The 10-year-old and his aunt who were killed when a car being pursued by officers crashed into them. And more than 30 people are left stuck on a roller coaster at Alton Towers just over a year after it crashed. Also tonight, we're talking about an explosion at Cape Canaveral. An unmanned rocket is destroyed after a blast on the launch pad. And would you vote for this man, the die-hard Jeremy Corbyn fans who think he should be the next Prime Minister?
His opponents hope this contest would show the Corbyn mania of last year had diminished. The evidence here in Stoke this afternoon is it hasn't.
Good evening, welcome to 5 News Tonight. I'm Matt Barbett. In the past hour, we've been given the dates of all the junior doctor strikes in England for the rest of the year. As well as the 5-day walkout starting a week on Monday, there'll be similar walkouts in October, November and December. The announcement was made after the Prime Minister, Theresa May, accused doctors' bosses of playing politics. But with patients ultimately affected, what do they make of it all? Simon Viger has been finding out.
Not safe, not fair, not safe, not fair.
We thought all this had come to an end in May. We were wrong. The deal brokered at the conciliation service ACAS was then rejected by a majority of junior doctors in England. They've now called a record 5-day strike beginning Monday week. And in my unscientific survey at Homerton Hospital in East London, they still have broad public support.
You know, we've just had one with my grandmother right now, and they were, the junior doctor was, you know, just so sleep deprived, but just wanted to continue just so they could finish their course.
We don't want to return to, you know, the 80-hour working week. I mean, they still do a lot of that, don't they?
And a 5-day strike the week after next?
Well, if that's what they've got to do to get what they want, then yeah.
I think that people should still stick by hospital staff. These doctors are being pushed around too much.
No, I don't believe it. No.
Well, 5 days is too long.
Yes, too long.
The sticking point again is terms and conditions. The BMA says in particular junior doctors who are young mothers will be far worse off. The Prime Minister, who was visiting Solihull today, is standing firm.
The government is putting patients first. The BMA should be putting patients first, not playing politics.
The junior doctors leader who recommended the last deal has resigned. His successor told me they are united. How close was the vote here going ahead for this strike?
So the Junior Doctors Committee put a proposal to Council, and Council endorsed that proposal.
How close was it?
It was voted through by Council, and Council support the decision.
Are you confident that this strike will be solid?
Junior doctors have rejected the contract, and they have told us that they can support continuing industrial action.
Yet again, both sides have dug in, and it's very hard to see a way out before the next round of strikes.
So Simon, give us these other dates. When exactly will they be?
Yeah, it's absolutely unprecedented, Matt. So apart from the 5 days a week on Monday, let's look at the dates. You've got those 5 in September, then you've got 5 in early October, but they straddle a weekend, and those days, the Saturday and the Sunday, the doctors will work. Then 5 days in mid-November, 5 days in early December, so right into the autumn, presumably trying to apply some pressure on the government to go back to ACAS, but we thought ACAS had sorted it all out last time.
Well, quite, and that's a big number of working days they're going to be striking for. So what impact is that likely to have on people?
Well, for the next soonest days in September, that's the least notice the hospitals have ever had, and they are saying they're going to have to postpone 100,000 routine operations like hip operations. 1 million appointments are going to be cancelled. Of course, the consultants can step in like they have before and cover the jobs, but they can't keep doing it forever without it having a big impact on the day-to-day work of hospitals. It's worth pointing out, of course, that this is England only. Junior doctors in Scotland and Wales are keeping their contracts, so no strikes there. Northern Ireland yet to decide.
Simon, thanks a lot. The young boy and his auntie who were killed by a suspected stolen car in South London yesterday have been named. 10-year-old Micaiah McDermott was hoping to be an actor. He'd recently auditioned to be in a TV series. He died with 34-year-old Rosie Cooper when they were hit by the car as it was being chased by police. Dominic Reynolds reports.
His life was just getting started. Yesterday, it ended on a London pavement. Micaiah McDermott was 10. He and his aunt, Rosie Cooper, were in the right place at the wrong time. Today, that place slowly filled up with flowers. Mums and children trying to take in that a family they know has been broken simply by chance.
People used to get me and him mixed up because we both had afros.
Nathan was a friend of Micaiah at making other kids happy.
It was funny because he always used to make jokes out of something that people make arguments out of, so then they wouldn't get into arguments.
So he sort of made peace?
Yeah. He was a kind friend. He was understanding, funny.
The car that killed budding actor Micaiah and Rosie also hit 3 girls, thought to be his sisters and her daughter, there in hospital. Police were pursuing the car when it mounted the pavement. They suspected it was stolen. Where that cone is today, yesterday there was a bollard, but the car crashed through it after it lost control around this corner. Friends of the family have told me they were only on the pavement at all because they were on their way to the park. It's only 50 yards away. The incidents put the spotlight on how police make suspected criminals stop on the roads. 21 people died last year in connection with police road pursuits. The 23-year-old driver of the car is in custody, arrested on suspicion of causing death by dangerous driving, and the police watchdog is investigating what happened. All the while, the flowers continue to arrive with their messages. Such a tragedy, taken too soon. Dominic Reynolds, 5 News in South East London.
Well, the Independent Police Complaints Commission says that over the past 10 years, 252 members of the public have died following road traffic incidents involving the police in England and Wales. With me now is Kevin Delaney, who's the former head of the Metropolitan Police Traffic Division and is currently head of road safety at the Institute of Advanced Motorists. Good evening to you, Kevin.
Good evening.
Heard from another senior police officer, former police officer today, saying that these kinds of chases, and we can't talk about this one specifically, but in general, they're a lose-lose situation. Do you agree?
Yes, I certainly wouldn't disagree with that. I mean, the difficulty about this is that no matter how hard the police service as a whole tries to improve the safety of police pursuits, there is a difficulty. And that difficulty is that it's not the police officers doing the pursuing who actually sort of govern the safety or danger of the pursuit. It is the individual being pursued. And if that individual chooses to drive at high speed or run red lights or whatever, there is nothing the police officers doing the pursuing can do except call off the pursuit.
And we've also seen police officers killed in trying to stop car chases from happening, not least on Merseyside more recently. So shouldn't they just be banned, these car chases? We've got enough cameras everywhere to capture a car driving away from a crime or with a criminal in it. What's the point?
I think there's a very good argument to say that police pursuits should be stopped as a matter of course. However, that said, I think that there will be instances where the public would want the pursuits to take place. For example, where it's necessary to save life or preserve life, or to thwart a terrorist incident or something like that. So I think there is a compromise position that actually says no police pursuits except to save life or to thwart a terrorist incident.
I know when you were a serving officer, you were involved in several pursuits. What was it like?
probably the most scaring thing that I ever did in my police service, because you are not in control of what is happening. And in fact, at some point during the pursuit, you are not in control of yourself, because of course there comes a time when the pursuing officers, the adrenaline starts to flow. And when the adrenaline starts to flow, it becomes quite difficult to start making logical decisions. So, you know, and the overwhelming sort of emotion that I felt was one of relief when the pursuit was over. And it didn't matter whether I'd actually managed to sort of, whether the person being pursued had been caught or had got away. There was a relief that it had ended and nobody was hurt.
Of course, investigations are still going on into what happened in Penge, but again, looking at the bigger picture, an average of 25 people a year for the past decade being killed in situations that are similar, doesn't that suggest that something has to happen now to make things safer?
I think yes. I think something, you know, something really does need to be done. Now, whether that involves the Home Office or the, I think it's now called the College of Policing, and the public in some sort of dialogue or whatever, I think something does need to be done. In the longer term, however, I do believe that technology could and should provide an answer. Under the bonnet of every car on the roads is enough computer technology to actually bring that vehicle to a slow and controlled halt. Okay. If only somebody will devise a means of actually communicating with it. I can believe it can be done, and I think it should be done.
Kevin, many thanks indeed for coming in today. The rollercoaster ride that crashed at Alton Towers last year has broken down again. This time, dozens of people were left trapped in a carriage at an awkward angle after it stopped mid-ride. Warren Nettleford is in our newsroom now. What happened, Warren?
Well, Matt, the most important thing is that nobody was hurt. All 32 people who were on board the Smiler ride this afternoon were led to safety by staff at Alton Towers. Now, some pictures have emerged on social media showing just how precariously those people who were still on the ride were earlier this afternoon. Alton Towers say they temporarily stopped the ride to investigate claims that a piece of debris had fallen from one of the carriages. We're not sure exactly what that was, but they also say that at no time were any guests at the theme park at any risk. But of course, this incident only comes just over a year since the devastating crash on the same ride, which left 5 people with life-changing injuries. 2 of them had leg amputations, and Alton Towers, the owners of Alton Towers, admitted liability by breaching the Health and Safety Act following an investigation. Now, the ride only reopened in March earlier this year. We're not sure exactly when the ride will reopen following this latest incident.
Warren, thanks a lot. Britain's manufacturing sector has made a surprisingly strong recovery. New figures show that last month growth was at its highest level for nearly a year, largely because a fall in the value of the pound has helped improve exports. It's not even a year since Jeremy Corbyn was elected as the Labour leader, and right now he's fighting to do it all over again. Despite minimal backing from his own MPs and poor polling nationally, his supporters think they can get him all the way to number 10. Our political editor Andy Bell has visited a rally for Mr Corbyn in Staffordshire.
I'd like a massive Stoke-on-Trent welcome to Jeremy Corbyn.
Is there another politician in Britain who could summon a crowd like this? Jeremy Corbyn is back having to fight for his leadership just a year after winning it, because 4 out of 5 Labour MPs say they have no confidence he could win a general election. He and they think otherwise.
We have won all the parliamentary by-elections we've faced, we've won all the mayoral elections we've faced, we've beat the Tories in the local government elections, and we recruited 300,000 members to the Labour Party.
His opponents hoped this contest would show the Corbyn mania of last year had diminished. The evidence here in Stoke this afternoon is it hasn't.
There's no doubting the support here, but is that enough?
Okay. What about the fact that so many Labour MPs say they can't work with Jeremy Corbyn? Does that worry you?
Let's hope he gets rid of him. Let's hope he gets rid of him when he gets voted in as leader and they get deselected and some people who support him get put in.
All these people in the Parliamentary Labour Party are worried about are their tickets being thrown off the gravy train. They're going to get kicked off the gravy train.
He's got the backing of all of his members, and somehow that should be enough.
Okay, but I mean, they presumably don't think he can win an election. That's what they're worried about.
He can win an election, definitely. He's got all of us behind him.
Barely 200 metres away from the rally, a different atmosphere and some different views of the Labour leader.
Jeremy Corbyn, what do you think?
Not a lot.
Not a lot.
No.
Yeah, she told you, rubbish.
Rubbish?
Yeah.
Okay, you don't think he can win an election?
No.
It's just very nice. I like it.
Do you think he can win an election?
Well, so, I'm not sure.
Okay. What do you think?
Not bad.
What do you like about him?
He's honest.
No.
No.
I
wouldn't.
Sorry.
You wouldn't sort of think, wow, the next Prime Minister.
That is a challenge, but if this is anything to go by, he will be the leader, taking Labour into the next election. Andy Bell, 5 News, Stoke-on-Trent.
Still to come here on 5 News Tonight.
We will build a great wall along the southern border.
Donald Trump still promises to make Mexico pay for a huge wall on the border with the US if he becomes president. And if you were the victim of a violent crime, would you really want to meet your attacker? As MPs say all victims should be allowed to do so. I'll be talking to Paul Kohler, who forgave a man who beat him up after meeting him in prison. Paul will be with me after the break. Welcome back. You're watching 5 News Tonight. An unmanned rocket has exploded on a launch pad during a routine test firing in Florida. The Falcon 9 rocket was supposed to be lifting off from Cape Canaveral on Saturday. The blast shook buildings several miles away and sent plumes of thick black smoke into the air. Luckily, though, no one was injured. Space expert Sarah Cruddas is here now. And Sarah, you've just heard that there might be a reason for this.
Well, SpaceX have just released the latest statement about the cause of that. So the rocket wasn't actually launching today. It was doing what's known as a static test, and that's where you fire the rocket fuel for a little tiny bit to check everything's working. Obviously, something went wrong, but what they now think has happened is the explosion happened before we actually did the test. So it looks like as they were filling the top of the rocket with fuel, that's when it exploded from the top. And there's been some new images just released as well. And that caused a huge explosion, which is obviously going to have massive setbacks to SpaceX in the future.
Of course, it's a good thing that no one was injured. There's a reason why they do tests, and these are the reasons why, as we can see. But it was carrying a fairly important payload.
Well, yeah, it's going to be carrying its heaviest payload to date, so a 5.5-ton satellite, which was operated by an Israeli company. And it was actually going to be leased out to Facebook, who are using it to provide internet to the developing world. So this is part of a new project with Facebook to actually connect the world and provide internet across the world using space science and technology. So unfortunately, that's not going to happen. And what we're also going to see as well is a pushing back of other missions that should have happened with SpaceX.
Yeah, so SpaceX, the organisers of this, if you like, were planning to put people on a Falcon 9 rocket at some point.
Well, absolutely. I mean, this is the type of rocket that you may have seen those images of the rocket landing back, so going into space and then landing back on Earth. That's the same type of rocket which they were using, and they're planning to actually send NASA astronauts on this, well, were planning as soon as August 2017, so within the next year. And they're also planning later on this year to actually send up a reused rocket, so one which had been launched, landed on the barge in the ocean, as we've seen quite a few times now, and then refix it and send it up. So that's going to put that schedule back.
So this is a pretty big setback then for space exploration.
It is a big setback for SpaceX, but as always, will come through. I think it's important to remember, I mean, 89 years ago, Charles Lindbergh became the first person to fly solo across the Atlantic, and now we take it for granted. We're in the same period now in terms of space exploration as we were with aviation back then. There are going to be setbacks, but we're pushing forward to something bigger, and we're going to see huge things to come from SpaceX in the future.
Certainly puts it in perspective. Sarah, many thanks.
Thank you.
Now, just hours after what looked like amiable talks between the two, Donald Trump and the Mexican president appear to have fallen out once again. The reason? Mr. Trump's insistence that if he becomes US president, he'll build a wall between the two countries and make Mexico pay for it. Enrique Peña Nieto says he made it clear that wouldn't be the case. As Louise Beale reports, Mr. Trump has been talking even tougher on immigration as well.
Back to his most bullish. Giving a major speech on immigration at a rally in Phoenix, Donald Trump insisted to a cheering crowd that Mexico will pay for a border wall.
We will begin working on an impenetrable, physical, tall, powerful, beautiful southern border wall. And Mexico will pay for the wall.
It comes literally just hours after the presidential hopeful had travelled to Mexico to meet with the Mexican president. He was greeted by some protesters after he'd labelled Mexicans drug addicts, criminals and rapists in the past. But despite that, his visit and his tone were far calmer and conciliatory.
We did discuss the wall. We didn't discuss payment of the wall. That'll be for a later date. This was a very preliminary meeting. I think it was an excellent meeting.
But after Trump's comments at the rally, Mexican President Enrique Pena Nieto has hit back, tweeting, "At the beginning of the conversation with Donald Trump, I made it clear that Mexico will not pay for the wall." Trump has now responded, tweeting, "Mexico will pay for the wall." Many say his behaviour is classic Trump, and he won't care if he's criticised for it.
The fact that he's saying one thing or seeming to say one thing on one side of the border and seeming to say something else on the other side of the border, that's fine with him. To the extent that he gets critical coverage that points out the difference between it, his supporters will dismiss it as perhaps the news media being too critical of him and kind of zeroing in on him and attacking him.
Yet his rival Hillary Clinton, who he is trailing behind in the polls, says the way he's acting towards Mexico just isn't right.
It certainly takes more than trying to make up for a year of insults and insinuations by dropping in on our neighbors for a few hours and then flying home again. That is not how it works.
Another day and another speech. Just this afternoon, Trump has reiterated his plan to build a wall on the Mexican border. Anyone hoping he'd soften his stance during his campaign looks to be disappointed. Louise Beale, 5 News.
Now, you may remember the shocking story of Paul Kohler. 2 years ago, the university law lecturer from London was badly beaten in his home by a gang of burglars. And you may find the images we're about to show you distressing, but Paul needed facial reconstruction surgery following that attack. This is him with his wife just a week afterwards. And just over a year later, he decided to meet one of his attackers in prison, and he even shook his hand as part of a restorative justice scheme. Well, today a new report by the Justice Committee of MPs is calling for all victims of crime in England and Wales to have a legal right to contact with offenders, saying that at the moment it is a postcode lottery. Paul Kohler joins me now, I'm happy to say, and looking remarkably well, Paul, which is great to see because many people will remember those pictures of your horrific injuries. When the attack was happening, and this is incredible to hear, you still had a sense that one of the attackers wasn't quite wholehearted about it.
Yes, I could see in his eyes, actually. He was the chap who was going to bring the cabinet door down on my head. And you could see in his eyes he didn't really want to do it. And he mimed bringing it down on my head a couple of times. And at the third time when he was doing that, I think was actually going to do it, the police rushed in. But he was clearly more reluctant than the others.
So how soon after this attack finished, you started on the road to recovery, did it cross your mind the idea that you might at some point meet one of these men?
Well, I knew nothing about restorative justice, so I was on the radio talking about the attack and talked about the fact I didn't know why they'd done it and I wanted to know. And I was contacted by the charity Why Me, who said they facilitate this sort of restorative justice meeting, and did they want me to act for me to talk to him. So it was due to them intervening about a month after the attack.
Yeah, and did you agree immediately? Do you think it was a good idea straight away, or did you ponder it?
Oh yes, no, I said yes straight away, because the name of the charity Why Me sums it up. You have lots of unanswered questions, and so they were offering me a possibility that I grabbed.
Because we posed the question on Twitter, if you were the victim of a violent crime, would you meet your attacker? And you can guess what the response by and large was. Trevor simply said absolutely not. Rachel said, had my attacker been caught, I would have had no interest. He took enough time out of my life already. Some people would be surprised by your actions.
And that's right. That's absolutely understandable. We shouldn't assume restorative justice is good for everybody. A subset of people will find it useful. What I'd say to anyone is think about it. It's very empowering. Because the last time you met your attacker, they were dominating you, you were on the floor, they were beating you. When you meet them in a room as equals, it's an incredibly empowering and cathartic experience.
So were you surprised by the feelings you had when you met this man in prison?
I wasn't that surprised, because I was expecting that, actually, because I wanted to regain my autonomy. It was important to meet him on those terms. So I went there with that in mind, and I got that from it.
Yeah, this is a man who'd already been in trouble in his home country of Poland. Was he remorseful? Do you think perhaps he was more remorseful on meeting you?
Yes, I think so. I think it says a lot about him that he wanted to meet. It requires the perpetrator to say yes to the meeting, and he clearly wanted to go through that process, and it was very difficult for him. He was clearly very frightened when he came into the room. So yes, it said something that he wanted to come in, wanted to meet, and wanted to talk about.
Did you go through the attack with him? Did you ask him about his holding back in some way?
We did mention that, although not in any great detail, and it was interesting. I went into the room to find out why he did it. Interesting, my daughter went in, wanted to find out how he's going to change his life, and as the meeting progressed, we all thought that was the more important question because he'd apologised. The apology only made sense if he was going to change his life. So we stopped looking at the past and looked at the future, which was a very interesting dynamic during the 90-minute meeting.
And you felt the need to shake his hand at the end, as did your daughter and your wife?
Yes, and I hadn't planned to do that. But again, if you think about the psychology of it, the last time there'd been any physical contact, he'd been hitting me. This time, to hold him as equals.
Will you keep in touch with him then? Will you keep an eye on his progress? But he's going to be in prison for a long time.
He is.
When he comes out.
Yes, well, we won't be bosom pals, I'm sure. No. But part of, at the end of the meeting, there is a sort of an informal contract where he agrees to do certain things. He's going to do certain things, and when he does those, that will keep a sort of dialogue going.
So just finally, Paul, and you're an expert in law, you lecture on this kind of thing. Do you agree with the MPs who say this shouldn't be on a postcode by postcode basis? It should be available to all victims of crime across the country, should they want it?
Yes, but we shouldn't turn it into something they must do. It should be something available. We should publicise it.
OK. Paul, many thanks indeed for coming. Glad to see you're so well. Good. Well, look, an awful big response on that, of course, on Twitter. So do keep your messages coming in. Love to know your thoughts on all the stories we do via Facebook as well. Search for Channel 5 News there. But that's it from us for now. Sean Welby is here with the weather next. Danny has updates throughout the evening on Channel 5. For now, thanks very much indeed for your company. I'll see you on the right stuff, actually, in the morning, but then back with 5 News at 5 o'clock. Bye-bye.